Jim Dunaway, friend of the program, hit us up and said, if you had to fast forward or rewind on college football, would you fast forward through the next 2 years and just get to the expanded playoff, or rewind back to the Ron Franklin, Mike Godfrey, ESPN Saturday night era with no guarantee that history would repeat itself? I spent the majority of my afternoon thinking about this. Famously, I don't listen to music at the gym, so this is what dominated my mind. You know, Colin's listening to Linkin Park at the gym, as Colin does. I'm sitting here thinking about Jim Dunaway giving me the fast forward rewind button, like in the movie Click with Adam Sandler. Sneaky emotional scene in that movie, by the way. No spoiler alerts. I don't think there's an easy answer for this. I think some of you stereotype me and you just assume I'm rewind at all costs. Well, that's not always true. That's not true in college football. It's not true in life. There are things that I enjoyed about the past that I would love, that I would much prefer to the present. Music, film. But, you know, I don't necessarily want to go backwards when it comes to nutrition and medicine. There are a lot of really good things we got today. There are a lot of things that I just assume hit the rewind button on. So in college football, it's the same way. But what I'm ultra curious on, I'll get to the postseason thing at the end, because I think you know where I'm going on that. But what I'm interested on is some of the in-between and where you guys land on this. Because truthfully, I think we could do like a 3-hour telethon, and we could just take calls and raise money for a great cause, the Jesse Foundation, for example. We could just take calls on this, and we would probably get so many bits of feedback that I didn't think about. But what I thought about is the style of game. I don't know what I want to hit. Do I want to hit fast forward or rewind? I think some parts of our game today are very exciting. I also told you earlier in the show, I enjoy a good 17-13 defensive slugfest. I don't know what I want to go back to or go forward to. I think it's very much a case-by-case thing. When it comes to technology and what it's done for sports and what it's done for college football, we have never presented broadcast television like we're presenting it now when it comes to college football. The live presentation is unbelievable. It is mind-boggling when you go back and watch tapes of games from the early 2000s, and it looks like it's 1945. It's in what high-definition television has done is mind-blowing. And I don't have time to explain frame rates to you, as Bradley well knows, but it's mind-blowing. So that's a great thing. It's a great thing. Presentation, broadcast, what technology has allowed us to do in terms of replay. Do I really want to go back and watch teams get 5 downs en route to winning a championship? No, I don't want to watch that. Having said that, if I go back in time, I can get Keith Jackson back. I can get Ron Franklin back. I can get Mike Godfrey back. I don't know. I was talking to producer Jesse earlier about this. I don't know that even if you do your best, if you're Brad Nessler or Gus Johnson or Chris Fowler, I'm a huge Sean McDonough guy. Joe Tessitore, massive fan. I don't think those guys have any prayer of ever living up to the legend of Keith Jackson, only because once Keith Jackson's career was over, it started to become romanticized. Truthfully, Keith Jackson was being romanticized long before his career was over, but I mean, a lot of the newer generation, your biggest impression of Keith Jackson was the '05 Rose Bowl. Texas and USC, that's his last game. And that was the tail end of a decades-long career. That guy called World Series, he called national championships, called everything under the sun. And he's the soundtrack for your parents' and your grandparents' generation of college football, and anything that you watch in archival form that features a big game from the history of the sport, it probably has him as the narration, as the backdrop, as the play-by-play. My point is, he's been romanticized, rightfully so, to the point where no one would allow Keith Jackson to be bypassed. What I was trying to say there is kind of a side point. My point is, Keith Jackson really was that good. It's not that thing that people do with Babe Ruth where they say, no modern hitter could compare to Babe Ruth. Yeah, they could. Yeah, they could. Now, Babe Ruth didn't have the access to advanced strength and conditioning and technology and nutrition that the modern player has, which is why comparing eras is pointless. But yeah, they absolutely could measure up to Babe Ruth. Today's play-by-play guy, can they measure up to Keith Jackson? I don't think you'll be given a chance to, because just like Babe Ruth got 5% better every year after he retired and then passed on, Keith Jackson gets 5% better every year. The greatest have a tendency to do that. Have you ever noticed that? The greatest, Sandy Koufax throws 127 miles an hour today. Keith Jackson gets better and better and better, and the guy hadn't called a game since '05, and it's magical to watch. But if I went back in time, if I get to rewind, I get some of those classic broadcast pairings, and I wouldn't be against that. But there is one thing that has rubbed me the wrong way for a long time. And I know Google says I'm 53 years old because it's confusing me with the Outer Banks guy. Season 3 dropping next month, by the way. I am not 53 years old, but I'm about to sound 53 years old for a second. Cell phones have had a detrimental impact on live sporting experiences. And what I mean by that, and this is where I would not hit, this is where I love to hit rewind. I just told you technology has done good things for sports, and they have, but the price we've paid is, for some reason, at sporting events, people don't lose themselves in the moment anymore. At least a lot of people don't. They feel the need to capture the moment, which is ironic because in looking at their screen, they miss the actual moment. So the only memory they have is of looking at their phone's screen as the phone captured the moment. When LeBron broke the scoring record the other day, it was one of the most iconic shots that I've ever seen, photographic shots, because you had an entire arena full of people who have spent their parents' life savings to be courtside at that game, and they're all going like that as LeBron hits the shot. And Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, is sitting on the front row with his arms crossed, just watching. He's the only person who gets what I'm saying. When you're at sporting events, they're not as loud as they were a generation ago. Because a lot of times when people are going like this and they're recording something, they don't want to make noise because it ruins the shot. And I've got some news for you. 100% of the time, the game that you're attending will be on broadcast television, a replay will be available, and those cameras, pretty much 24 of them, or 16 if it's a B-level broadcast, are going to have captured a better shot than you captured in Section 228. I would love for people to put the phone down and get lost in the moment again, because the in-stadium atmosphere suffers because of it. I'm not saying it's not still loud. I'm just saying if I could rewind before people really cared about capturing it themselves, you know, the Flashbulb Era, give me that era. I miss the Flashbulb Era. You can pinpoint this, by the way, and it's not just college football. You go back to the mid-2000s, and you can pinpoint some of the last great events that happened before the cell phone reinvented how people attended sporting events. And it's a little nostalgic. I always go back to WrestleMania 18, personally. But you can look at the '05 Rose Bowl. Basically, it's the flashbulb ratio. The fewer flashbulbs you see in big moments, that means the more cell phones are out. And it had to happen, I know. But I guess my answer is, Jim, I don't know. I think there's about a 60% part of me that wants to rewind. But there is a solid 40% part of me who understands there's a lot of good that's come. Now, as it comes to the format of the sport, of course I don't want to go to the expanded playoff. I'm not relitigating that. I've made you a promise several weeks in a row now. I'm not going to debate the playoff expansion thing anymore. But of course I want to go back in time. Of course I'd love to go back to where people fought themselves and fought pollsters over who gets rewarded the national championship. But as I've explained to you, it's not because I think that was a foolproof way of deciding a national champion. It's because in college football, I just don't care about the end of the season as much. I care about Saturdays in the fall, the experience, and bowl season. And if I get a national championship game, that's great. I don't feel that way about any other sport, just college football. So when you argue with me, well, the NFL and NBA and Major League, yes, and I watch those sports, and I love watching the Super Bowl, love watching the World Series. Don't think it has any relevance when it comes to comparing it to college football. So that's me, and you can be you, and we'll be fine. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Make sure you like the video, and please subscribe to the channel. Not just for me, that's how we keep this entire thing free.